So we've dealt with all sorts of things with equations so far. We've worked with unknowns on both sides, we've worked with things with multiplications and additions. But one thing that we haven't seen so far are fractions. We've seen them in our answers, but not in the original equation. And we haven't seen division. That's because division and fractions are really the same thing. So if I write x over 4, that means the same as, now I wouldn't normally write this if I was solving an equation. This is just to show you why we do what we do. X over 4 is the same as x divided by 4 equals 7. So these two equations are in fact the same thing. That gives us a bit of a hint about how we might solve this. We are dividing by 4, and like every other equation we've solved, we want to do the opposite. So the opposite here is to times both sides of our equation by 4. Timesing by 4 on this side gets rid of the divide by 4, so we end up with just x. 7 times 4 is 28. Have a go. So hopefully you can follow from what I've done here. You don't need to put this step in. That was just to show you what's going on. So you're working with just looks like what is there on the left of my fingers. Have a go. I'll give you an answer in a little bit, but pause the video if you're going to give it a try. So, answer to this one here. We have a divide by 6 on this side, so the opposite is to times by 6. This side times by 6, well, x divided by 6 times by 6 just gets us back x. 11 times 6 is 66. So far so good. That element of working with fractions is not too bad. So long as you understand that it means x divided by 6, it's all nice and straightforward. There is one thing that really makes fraction equations harder, and it's the reason that I've left them till now. And that is there are two different types of fraction equation that you might get. There's this one and this one. Now they look very similar, but different things are going on. Here, we're doing x add 5 first, and then dividing by 4. Here, we're doing the divide by 4, and then adding the 5. Now that's important when we come to solve it, because remember we're working back through those steps. So here, we'll deal with the divide by 4 first, because it's the last thing that's happened. Here, we'll deal with the plus 5 first, because that's what's happened here. Now actually I'll talk a wee bit more about this when I come to it in a moment. There's two ways to solve this. I generally would deal with the plus 5 first. We can actually deal with the divide by 4 first in this case, but we've got to look carefully at what's happening. Let's solve these two first. Here, x plus 5 divided by 4, we're dealing with that divide by 4 because all of the x plus 5 is divided by the 4. So we can times by 4 to get rid of it. So timesing both sides by 4, that gives us x plus 5. Timesing this side by 4 gives us 4 13ths, which is 52. We've got a plus 5 to deal with now, so we can take away 5 from both sides. That leaves us with x equals 52 minus the 5 is 47. Have a go at this one, and I'll give you the answer. Just pause it, and I'll do the answer in just a moment. Okay, so this one, everything on the left-hand side is being divided by 8, so the opposite is to times by 8. That gives me x minus 3 equals, remember to times this side by 8, so we get 16. We've got to take away 3 here, opposite is to add 3. So we get x equals 19. So there's our working, and we've got our answer. Now, at this point, you may want to pause and go away and do the questions, which look like this. Okay, so I've got some questions up, which look exactly like everything we've done so far. So either like this style or this style. You might want to pause at this point, practice a few of those, get your head around them before we move on. I am going to continue answering the other examples though. So if you want to pause and go away and do questions at this point, that's fine. Or you can see what the difference is with these ones. So, as I said, the difference here is only the x is divided by 4. And that makes a big difference. And actually, there's two ways that we can solve it. You only need to use one of them. My personal favorite would be to deal with that plus 5 first. So x over 4 plus 5 equals 13. So we could take away the 5 first from both sides. Try and keep that in the middle of the camera. That's this taking away the 5 here leaves us with x over 4 equals, and 13 take away the 5 is 8. Now we deal with that divide by 4 by timesing by 4. And that leaves us with x equals 32. Now notice that that's very different to the answer we got up here. And the reason for that being that the 5 is not divided by the 4 here. Here, we couldn't take the 5 off both sides because the 5 is divided by the 4. So we couldn't take that off to start with. That doesn't work. Now, I do want to mention one other thing down here, which is there is a second way we could solve this. And I'm going to show this to you just so that you are aware and you can see how this would work. It would be possible to times by the 4 first. So just like you did up here, we could times everything through by the 4. So we could go times 4, times 4. Doing that, we would get x plus 20 equals 52. Why 20? Well, the 5 is not divided by the 4. So timesing x divided by 4 times 4 gives us back x. But we've got to do the 5 times the 4 separately. We didn't have to do that up here because the 5 was over the 4. But down here it's not. Last thing to do, take 20 off both sides. We end up with x equals 32. And that's exactly the same answer. Now, I would recommend following this method here. So if you see just the x over something, you can go on and solve that like that. Have a go. There's your turn. Pause the video. I'm only going to use, when I do them for you, I'm only going to use this left-hand method. So have a go at working your way through that and see how you get on. Okay, and so the answer to this one, well, we deal with the 3 is not divided by 8, so we can add 3 to both sides. So we get x over 8 equals 5. Now we've got x over 8, so we can times by 8. So we get x equals 40. Okay, and that gives us our answer to the question. Hopefully you can figure out what's going on there, and the little starter activity I gave you just before this will actually help to see what's happening as well. We are going to continue. We're going to do a second video on equations with fractions. That's going to look at some harder equations and some slightly odd cases. There won't be any your turns in that one, but I will show you some other harder equations involving fractions. And then there's going to be a third video where we look at fractions on both sides. So there's quite a few little developments to this that we will see as we go on.